An extra hour tonight. I wish I could. I wish you'd say, "Go ahead, Hannity. I'm taking the night off."
Oh yeah, well, whatever. Okay, bye.
All right. Welcome to the Laura Ingraham Show. I'm Hannity, filling in for Laura.
Hey, Sean. You know what I was looking at as I was listening to your show tonight? All of the Cheryl Mills. Like people forget. There's so much stuff that happened from the fall of 2016 to today. Yeah. Obviously, the Mueller, all the stuff we're learning about with Flynn tonight. But it just swamps all this other stuff that happened. We're going to talk about it with Chaffetz.
You know what? You know what fries me though? You know, this man's life. This is how we treat our heroes, because he didn't remember a fact and lying, and the FBI didn't even think this guy lied. This is wrong, and I am worried that we have one justice system if you're a Democrat or Hillary, and another for the rest of us. That's not right.
Cheryl Mills. You know, Sean, I agree with you, and I think again, our viewers and people across the country, a lot of this stuff is just, it's complicated. There are addenda and there's redactions and trying to follow what the substantial assistance Flynn gave. We don't really know. It's all kind of axed out.
But you know, too, remember, this was all information they obtained illegally against General Flynn.
Yeah, well, and also it wasn't collusion before the election to throw the election to Russia. That's all. At least from what we know, that's out the window. That's certainly nothing to do with Flynn. So I think that's what people have to keep their frame around, the frame of reference and the timing of what they're saying.
Well said.
A false statement is never good. We can't lie to investigators. But you also don't use these scam special counsel investigations to go trolling on this magic mission to try to find wrongdoing where it doesn't exist.
I think he deserved the benefit of the doubt. I think he deserved better than this.
Well, I agree. Sean, thanks so much.
Have a great
fantastic
show. Thank you.
All right, I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle on a very busy news night here in Washington. This show has it all for you. We have politics, culture, startling rejection of history. But first, breaking news, as I just said, in the Mueller probe, as the documents, sentencing documents against former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn just dropped. These are heavily redacted documents, revealing, among other things, that Flynn, former three-star general, provided substantial assistance and gave 19 interviews, sat 19 times before the special counsel, and other DOJ investigations. Now, as a result of Flynn's cooperation, Mueller and his team are recommending no jail time. It's important to note, the documents presented tonight do not provide specifics about what exactly Mueller has learned from Flynn, only that he provided documents and communications. Now, what issues those communications refer to tonight is anyone's guess. Remember, this has been a saga that has enveloped the entirety of Donald Trump's presidency, and in the process, destroyed, as Sean said, this good man's life. Even if Flynn does serve no prison time, the judge agrees with the prosecutor here, imagine how his life has been thrown into complete tumult. And for what? Was this 18-month process good for the country? Are we better off? Did we stave off future, Russian involvement in our election because a former three-star general had to bow to the altar of Bob Mueller and his special counselor helpers? I think we have to go through this methodically tonight, and we're going to do this. Real questions remain, and real questions must be answered as this investigation continues to move forward, although it looks like it's wrapping up. Here now, two men who've been studying this report, former Deputy Independent Counsel and Whitewater investigator Saul Weisenberg, and former House Oversight Chair and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, and Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and author of the forthcoming book, The Case for Trump. And he joins us now. Saul, let's start with you. Your thoughts after reading these documents?
Well, my thoughts are, first of all, the general would have received probation no matter what, whether he cooperated a little or cooperated a lot. Like you say, the key parts of how he assisted have been redacted. What stands out the most is that a lot of people thought Mueller was going to use these sentencing memos to tell the world about his case because he's afraid that his final memo may not be publicized. He didn't do that here. In fact, he showed remarkable professionalism by keeping redacted. He could have said, here's how he helped, and it could have been a bombshell, and he didn't do that. So I think, to me, that's the big takeaway. The memo itself is kind of a dud because it's all the good stuff is redacted.
Yeah, Jason, here's part of the memo. Given the defendant's substantial assistance and other considerations set forth below, a sentence at the low end of the guideline range, including a sentence that doesn't impose a term of incarceration, is appropriate and warranted. I guess it's the meaning of substantial assistance.
Well, you can be polite, you can comply, you can answer all of their questions. Donald Trump has answered all their questions. He's been as open and transparent as anything. But I think Stahl's right. There was no bombshell in here because there's no bombshell. It's that simple. If they had him on collusion with Russia to affect the election, absolutely they would have gone after him. But
He pled to 2 counts of 1001, right? 2 counts of lying to
But this is a process crime. He should have filled out the proper paperwork. We're not going to here to excuse it, but it's the inconsistent application of the law that drives everybody crazy. I can't tell you how many people came before the Oversight Committee when I was the chairman, and they lied to us. We referred it to the Department of Justice and said, we're not interested.
Yeah, we can't do
But then it's with
it.
Donald Trump, and you betcha they're going to go after. They gave immunity to Hillary Clinton's closest advisors.
Oh, I was just reading the Cheryl Mills stuff. I mean, these are things like I forgot until tonight.
But Mueller didn't do that.
Mueller didn't do that.
In fairness to Mueller, that's not his jurisdiction. So it is unfair. You can say it's unfair. But Mueller has a specific thing that he's supposed to look at. He's not supposed to look at Cheryl Mills.
But he's not looking at collusion with Russia on the election.
Yeah,
this stuff happened after that.
Well, it is interesting, and VDH, I want to get you in on this, because the actions we're talking about here, his conversation with the FBI, that they didn't believe included lies. They did not believe, including Peter Strzok, who did the interview with Flynn, did not. He went back to headquarters, and they didn't think he lied. Those were the 1001 violations, lying reportedly about his conversation with the Russian ambassador, whether that conversation included a conversation about reference to easing up on the sanctions, or don't go crazy on the sanctions. In other words, we're coming in, we're going to get rid of the sanctions. And apparently he either misremembered or wasn't forthcoming on that. It didn't go into, well, what happened before this in 2016? Were you setting up some deal to make it easier for Russia to interfere in our elections? Which, again, is what the special counsel was set up to examine, that type of collusion. Even with the redactions, when it comes to Flynn at least, there wasn't any collusion on his part. The question is, were there any other figures associated with the Trump administration or Trump campaign that could be still, as Saul alluded to, caught up in this dragnet?
Yeah. I think just as a historian, when I look for 2 things in these Mueller stories, one, does the Logan Act appear, and it was referenced in this, and one is the Foreign Agents Act, the FARA Act appear. And when that appears, it tells me they really don't have anything, only because we've only had 2 people prosecuted on the Logan Act. John Kerry, all of August and September, met with the Iranian foreign ambassador in Paris, and he admitted that he was discussing the Iran deal, which is antithetical to the efforts of the present administration. Nobody called that a Logan violation, or at least seriously did. And we have all sorts of the swamp in Washington. Everybody's dealing with foreign agents. I mean, they're representative governments. So Christopher Steele was not a U.S. citizen. He was a foreign British subject, and he was supplying data to the Hillary Clinton campaign for money, and he was seeding it throughout the government. Nobody talked about the agents there. And then more importantly, in that document, there's worry that Flynn was working in a way that was unethical with the Turkish government or maybe with the Russian government, but it had no effect, because when Donald Trump came in, when you look at Russian sanctions, the oil policy of the U.S., increasing production, arming Ukrainians, attacking Russians in Syria, or whether it was ending the Obama romance with Erdogan in Turkey, we were much tougher on Turkey and much tougher on Russia. And finally, I mean, if you want to reduce everything, you get down to one point. All of these stories, the surveillance, the entire collusion comes back to the Steele dossier. And that was the source of the FISA warrants that was used, in part at least, to collate testimony with surveillance. And we know now that although they said it was a bought document, no one ever told the FISA court judges that it was paid
Absolutely
for by Hillary
not.
Clinton. Nobody ever told them that Christopher Steele, the author of that dossier, had been let go as unreliable. Nobody ever told the FISA court judges that the news accounts they presented to those courts were circular and were based on the dossier itself. And so that was kind of a poison tree, and a lot of these people had said things in numerous testimonies, not knowing that that would be collated with a surveillance, and then we get into the unmasking. So it's, and then finally, and this is finally, 25 people in the DOJ or FBI have been reassigned, chose to be retired, or were fired in association to this entire mess. Nobody's talking about it. I can't think of any time in U.S. history with the two top intelligence agencies, the head of those agencies, Jim Clapper and John Brennan, not only had lied under oath to a congressional committee, admitted they lied under oath, and had entire exemption. So I know it's not YouTube all the time, but that's really disturbing that we have this Mueller track, and then we have all of these violations that, so when Mueller starts to be so sanctimonious and quote Logan Act and the Foreign Agent Registration Act and government officials have to be above the law, well, yeah, but that's not happening. So
well,
we're losing public confidence.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of rich. It wasn't Mueller himself, but what preceded Mueller to set up this entire investigation from the beginning. And Saul, we have gone over this meticulously. The reference to his military service, his exemplary public record, how common is that in a sentencing document such as this, taking that into account as a mitigating circumstance? I mean, it seems to kind of make sense, but...
Well, it's very common if you're the defense attorney doing a sentencing memo, and it's common if you're the government and that client has helped you. But I wanted to say one thing about Flynn. There's nobody in town who really believes that Flynn would have pled guilty unless Mueller had something against one of his family members. Or
threatened his family members.
Right, and that's often done by prosecutors, and I don't know of anybody who thinks that Flynn would have pled if that wasn't out there, and we just don't know what that is. I do want to say in Mueller's defense, there is a mention of the Logan Act here, but Mueller does not say in any way that Flynn violated it.
Yeah, but throwing that in there.
No, it's about what. But the other thing to keep in mind, is that Mueller does say, he doesn't say what it is, but Mueller does say that Flynn provided important information about connections between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, or attempts to make connections. All I'm saying is, you're right, he doesn't say that Flynn did that, but he does say that Flynn provided information. So again, if there's nothing there, that may be the one reason Mueller's not talking about it, or it may be that Mueller's a professional and it's just not appropriate to release that information.
There's a lot of redactions here. The left tonight is going crazy. They're like, okay, it's Donnie Jr. I mean, it's speculation overdrive tonight.
Delusion.
On the other well, yeah, the collusion is all in the redactions.
It's delusion. It's delusion.
Delusion, collusion, all in the redactions. But Jason, again, we go to again what Victor Davis Hanson said. We have proven instances of blatant lying to cover up how this whole thing started in the first place. Lying to federal judges. And I say it's lying. When you say you don't reveal who actually started this whole ball rolling on the dossier, that's a lie. I still think the FISA judges should be a lot more angry about how this all went down from the beginning. From that spawned this entire investigation. From that filing and that surveillance spawned this entire thing.
It was
period.
It was an absolute fabrication. They planted stories. Remember, a big part of this when we finally
it's like a circular deal, like it's in the press. Oh, cite that and then put it in the FISA.
That's right. Plant the story, take the story, present it to the court. I do think the House Judiciary and the Senate Judiciary, if Lindsey Graham's going to do his job to his fullest, bring up the FISA court judges. Have them explain how this process works. I was on the House Judiciary when we were going through hearings. They wouldn't let us even go to attend one of those meetings, and they wouldn't let us even talk to those judges. But there was clearly lying, misinformation. I know the Inspector General is still doing an investigation of that FISA court. It's probably not till mid next year, it's best I can tell. It's going to take way too long. But the bottom line here with Mr. Flynn, he didn't have the financial means to fight.
Yeah, I would say that when Saul, you referenced that, and Jason picking up on it, he doesn't have a lot of money. I mean, when a prosecutor says, "You ever want to see your wife again? You know, your son, you have a little grandchild. He's never going to see his grandchild. You're going to go to jail. He's going to go to jail for the next 30 years." Well, don't worry. It's scary for most people. I mean,
but he never. He had competent counsel. He never would have gone to jail if he had fought this and lost. He never would have gone to jail for a significant period of time for offenses like this. I believe, from what I've. Right.
1,001 statements in an article he wrote for The Hill
they didn't have
about Turkey.
They didn't have anything.
His guideline range of 0 to 6 months was that he would have had that no matter what. That would have been his guideline range. So what's going on here is there was something else. There was a threat that was made against somebody. But
it's his son. It's about his son.
Here's something else, though. You can believe two things at the same time. You can believe there was deceit of the FISA court and that should be investigated and that people should be prosecuted if they have found to have lied about that. And you can also believe that Mueller should be allowed, even if you don't think he should have been appointed, that Mueller should be allowed to continue his investigation and not be attacked every day by the president. You can actually believe those two things.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's helpful to attack Mueller every day, and I don't. I tend to look at what they produce after 18 months, and you got this guy in a vice grip for 18 months. Unless those redactions are really like knock your socks off, maybe they will be.
I don't think they are.
I don't either. I think this is a big zero. I think this Mueller thing and what they did to Flynn is disgusting. And I want to talk to you about this VDH. What they did on the Turkey issue, which is getting almost no play tonight in the other networks. They actually cite, as you said, the foreign the FARA Act, the Foreign Agents Registration. What is it? I always get it.
Yes.
The defendant made a second series of false statements to the DOJ concerning his contacts with the Republic of Turkey, specifically on March 7th, 2017, after he was no longer in the administration. The defendant made materially false statements in multiple documents that he filed pursuant to the Foreign Agent Registration Act pertaining to a project he and his company had performed for a principal benefit of the Republic of Turkey. And apparently the false statement was, well, it was more directed by the government of Turkey than you let on. And he wrote a piece in The Hill about that minister that the president of Turkey wanted back in Turkey. That came out in March. I just find this to be, like, this is it? You got the FARA and the, I'm sorry, I just think this is ridiculous. I'm sorry.
I don't believe that you should attack the special counsel, but what Mr. Mueller is doing, he's criminalizing the status quo behavior in Washington. That's what Washington people do. And what we have to ask ourselves, did it have any effect? And when Trump came into office, they reversed the so-called special relationship that Obama had developed with Turkey that gave us, in part, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and et cetera. So Trump was harder on the Russians, he's harder on the Turks. If you had said, Laura, 18 months ago, $30 million ago, when we were told that there was a new dream team, these were the all-stars, these were Mueller's army, all this gushing about these wonderful Ivy League lawyers, et cetera. If you had told them that we were going to start with this bang, and we were going to end up with a whimper. They were going after Jerome Corsi of InfoWars and Roger Stone, a perennial provocateur. I think the New York Times would have wept and been humiliated. That's where we are now. 18 months later, we're going after minor characters that had always been in fringe activities, and they're supposedly going to drop the bombshell. Every day we hear a bombshell, bombshell, bombshell.
No, tonight it was
this investigation.
Victor, tonight it was the president is was shaken, rattled by the Flynn memo. Every time something drops, they have a camera in the White House, and the president is rattled. I'm sure he doesn't like the fact this investigation. I mean,
I don't think Mr. Mueller necessarily is culpable himself, but whether he did know so or not, what we see now is we've seen the impeachment writs early in the administration. We saw the emoluments clause. We saw the 25th Amendment. We saw the Logan Act. And now the Mueller investigation psychologically fills that same need because we don't have any information that the Trump campaign or transition did anything differently than Ronald Reagan did in 1980. There's no.
I guess Saul is, I think, judicious. You're judicious and you're prudent in your analysis. We do not know what is in these redactions. We don't know Michael Cohen has tape recordings that are, we don't know. This is like a slow roll. The question is, when is this ultimately, do you think, going to wrap up? Do you have any idea?
I think we're near the end, but keep in mind, how you typically determine what a prosecutor's office has is you look at every plea deal, you look at the language of the deal, and you look at the statement of the offense.
Yeah.
That's where they say, this is what the guy did. And in every single case, you have nothing to indicate that there is a major collusion/conspiracy case involving Trump or his lieutenants conspiring illegally with the Russians or conspiring with anybody to hack computers. Now, I'm just saying, all I can do is read the tea leaves based upon what prosecutors and defense attorneys always look at. If you look at the documents, there's not going to be anything major there. That's just the way it is.
It's not on what everyone thought. Trump's working with the left. Trump's working with Putin's working with, and they're all going to, steal the election from Hillary. That's what the average person was led to believe at the beginning of all of this, and we'll see where we end up. Fantastic analysis by all of you. Thank you so much. There are a lot of stories we're going to cover tonight, and one, the war against history. Yes, next. Enemies of American history. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, back in August, protesters at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, took it upon themselves to rip down a Confederate statue. Well, it was the Silent Sam statue, and it honored UNC students who had fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War. Over the last few years, the statue has been labeled a celebration of white supremacy by some, and as a piece of history by others. Well, yesterday, the university board announced a plan to house the statue in a new $5 million history and education center on the edge of campus, where it would be properly contextualized. But even as she announced the plan, Chancellor Carol Folt was clearly not entirely on board.
I have a preference to move it off campus, but like everyone here, I swore to obey the law. And sometimes you don't agree with laws. But I don't have the privilege of choosing which laws I agree with and which ones I do not.
How brave. Well, a 2015 North Carolina law forbids agencies from permanently removing and relocating state-owned memorials or statues. And North Carolina likely passed the law to protect against what it saw happening across the country. And what's been happening? Well, nationally, since 2015, more than 100 Confederate monuments and statues have been removed. While students, protesters, and faculty members at UNC want the same fate to befall Silent Sam. The North Carolina law be damned. Forget about it. They took to the campus Monday night to protest the plan to house the statue in a new building.
No KKK, no fascist USA! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Silence and the
UNC is not concerned about preserving history. It is concerned about not upsetting its racist donors and the Board of Trustees and Carol Folt.
I am disappointed to be associated with an institution that continuously seeks to protect and glorify the white supremacists who love to hate us.
To enable white supremacy is to perpetuate white supremacy, and that is exactly what the Board of Trustees and Carol Folt are doing right now.
It's funny how they're reading it off their phones. Well, who needs paper? But that history were so and that cut and dried. There's a movement, particularly among the young, to hate the past and eradicate anything they find objectionable or troubling. And look, every country, all history, has its bad sides, it has its good sides. Good stuff, bad stuff. But this recalls the kind of destructive mindset of, let's say, ISIS. Think about ISIS, what they did. They pillaged and they wiped away irreplaceable historical and religious monuments. From Palmyra, remember, in Syria, simply because they could. It was offensive to them. Now, no matter what one thinks of the way this was all treated after the Civil War, whether they should have built these monuments or not, this happened, okay? The Confederacy happened. And we owe it to the future to leave history as it existed undisturbed. Continue to debate it. have conversations about it. But why not allow future generations the opportunity to mark this history, process it, and come to their own conclusions? Put up another statue commemorating the slaves who were abused and killed adjacent to Silent Sam. But to destroy instead of engage, to defy the law instead of respect it, is no way to honor the past or the future or to highlight all the gains America has made. Now, by committing acts of violence to get your own way and defying laws to remove figures that you find offensive, you start to look a little bit like the thing you're protesting. Should you succeed, by the way, in the future, some other mob might well tear down your statue because they themselves find what you did offensive. So where does it all end? And you would have, taught them that, it's fine to destroy all trace of whatever we find objectionable in the past. Now let's hope the board of UNC, North Carolina's Historical Commission, has less destructive tendencies. We can hope, and that's the angle. Joining me now, two students from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Magdalena Horzempa, who's a student supportive of the Silent Sam statue on campus, and Alana Edwards is the president of the UNC Young Democrats, a group adamantly opposed to the statue's presence anywhere on campus. Now, Alana, it seems that the first step for critics of these statues was to move them out of the public square and into historical buildings. Okay, so that happened, or that was happening, but now that's offensive. So where does this ever end? What do you propose be done with this statue? You can't have it in the public, out in the public where it always has been. Can't move it to the building, so what now?
Well, I think with Silent Sam down, it is time to start contextualizing the past of the monument. And I think one thing I would like to bring up is that when you look at when this monument was erected, it was 1913, the height of the Jim Crow era, and the dedication speeches espoused white supremacy. And personally, I'm a proud Southerner, and I had ancestors fighting on both sides of the war, and I value the lessons to be learned from the Civil War. But I see this monument as destructive and a symbol of a different era entirely, and not, any actions of UNC students who served during that time, but as when it was dedicated in 1913, that era of white supremacy. And so while there's no clear-cut solution, I do think, and state law is very restrictive, I think that it deserves a place off campus where it can be placed within the proper context of which it was erected.
So let's go to you, Magdalena, on this. What should happen to this statue? There is a law, a state law, passed unanimously, I believe, in the state, one chamber of the State House, but then ultimately it was signed into law. That exists. You can't just, remove things never to be seen again. These are state-owned memorials, and it says very clearly, a monument, memorial, or work of art owned by the state may not be removed, relocated, or altered in any way without the approval of the North Carolina Historical Commission. They wanted to, basically stop these things from disappearing in the middle of the night, as we saw in places like in New Orleans, where statues have been removed, never to be seen again. So Magdalena, what happens next?
So next, of course, I feel that if these students are going to protest on the north side of campus, they're absolutely going to continue protesting the statue being in the new museum and education center on the south side of campus. I feel that only placing the monument on the south side of campus in a building allows UNC administration to ignore the problem that's going on campus. And that's liberal students feeling that they can run the university and try and encompass and overthrow the opinions of the majority and only allow the public to see the vocal minority that's taking place. In my capacity as the chairwoman of UNC College Republicans, I've said before, I do not condone any sort of mob rule or anarchist activity on campus, and for these students to feel that it was okay to take this statue down in the very beginning in August, that's absolutely not okay. Chancellor Folt let them get away with it. UNC police, Chapel Hill police, and the lack of consequences from events in Durham also made students think that they could get away with something like this, and that's absolutely not.
Alana, this is, when you look at these images, this is like mob rule. I mean, you rip something down, you say, well, I'm offended by it, and we're all supposed to throw you a parade. I mean, welcome to the world. I mean, I'm kind of tired of the snowflake line. All the college students are snowflakes. But the real world is filled with complicated, very difficult dilemmas for everyone. You know, you might not like.
I agree, and I think
you might not like the lyrics to a song you hear on the radio. Maybe you like the tune, but you don't like the lyrics. Well, I guess you could say, well, it offends me. That should be banned because it objectifies women as just a piece of, you know, sexual gratification or something. I mean, pretty much everybody is offended by something. Like, you know what I'm offended by? I'm offended by students who refuse to see that the progress that has been made in the United States of America and seem to want to find some type of, I don't know if it's belonging or relevance in a world where moral relativism actually kind of reigns supreme. But it looks like students are, it's kind of like a social gathering almost. Like, what can we tear down today, or how can we get on YouTube, or how can we, you know, and I'm glad you're on with us tonight to try to explain this. But I think most people in the real world are like, kids, you know, don't try this at home, because if you try this at home, you'll be put in jail. You try this in the real world, you'll be put in jail. Go ahead.
Well, I think we see in the civil rights era, I think people would have said similar things about people protesting then. I think civil disobedience and peaceful protests are...
Does that look peaceful to you, what happened last night?
Well, I would say...
Really?
Last night, I believe there were
peaceful?
two arrests.
That's not Rosa Parks, sweetie. That's not Rosa Parks.
Well, I would like to emphasize that there were 2 arrests, and they were nonviolent, isolated cases. And I think with any group that large, there will be, you know, people who act in ways that may cause them to get arrested. But I think what we saw last night, there was no violence. I think that it was just students voicing their opinion. And one point I would like to bring up is that our democratically elected student body president voted no to this proposal. So I don't really agree with the sentiment that this isn't what students want, because I think clearly we see by the numbers gathering by the student body president, by the 5,000 letters and emails written to Chancellor Folt when she solicited input from the campus community. I think they're all pretty clear that students don't want Silent Sam on campus.
All right, we got Magdalena, your final thoughts, real quick.
Absolutely not. This action does not encompass what the student body needs to be. UNC was founded on Lux Libertas, which is light and liberty, and neither one of these situations encompass that. Neither one of them. This statue belongs where it was.
Well, I think more debate, not less debate. Don't remove historical markers. Talk more about them. Guys, thank you for being on. Something interesting happened.
Who do you want to see run?
Look, we'll have 30 or 40 probably great candidates running for president.
That's a lot. I think 40, really? 40 candidates?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of U.S. senators who are talking about, a lot of governors, a lot of people outside of politics. I think we're going to have a big field.
And you thought the GOP field was big in 2016, 30 or 40 people. Wow. Well, just look at these recent developments. As Democrats continue to embrace Beto-mania, it goes unabated, old Joe Biden is reemerging to say that, hey, wait a minute, Amtrak minute here, okay? I think I'm the most qualified person in the country to be president, he said. Well, there's a new twist to all of this tonight. Just hours ago, it was reported that Beto O'Rourke secretly met with President Obama, who is said to be very excited about his potential candidacy. So how bruising will a Biden-Beto Democrat primary be? Throw in another 28 people or so. Here to debate, Corey Lewandowski, former Trump 2016 campaign manager, and Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst, co-host of The Five. Juan, Obama's old staff seems to be, you know, prepping an instant kind of plug and play for the Beto presidential campaign. Your thoughts?
Well, not quite. I mean, Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, has said, you know, you got to win something, and he thinks the idea that Beto O'Rourke did not win versus Ted Cruz in Texas means that he shouldn't be a contender here. He's got to prove that he can be a winner. But I see lots of Obama people, to your point, Laura, saying, and Obama people saying, hey, you know what, we haven't seen excitement, this kind of charisma, this kind of young people attracted to a candidate since 2008. And that's Barack Obama. And by the way, in Iowa, they've just done a survey, and it came back that most of Iowa Democrats say they'd like to see a young, energetic, new face on the scene. And I don't think there's anyone who fits that bill better than O'Rourke.
Yeah, but of course his old vice president, Corey, But Joe Biden clearly isn't feeling the love here. I mean, he is pretty experienced. Okay, he was vice president for 8 years, yeah. And Robert Francis, you know, does the shirt sleeve thing, kind of like Obama used to do. He used to jump on stage with shirt sleeves. He's young and energetic and loved by a lot of Democrats. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Someone who's never won, big position, looks like the mojo and the energy is moving to him. Never seen anything like it.
Well, this reminds me of Robert De Niro in Raging Bull when he says, I could have been a contender, I could have been somebody. But you got to win first is what it comes down to. Next thing you know, you're going to tell me the ticket's going to be 2 failed candidates. Beto O'Rourke and Andrew Gillum from Florida are going to combine to be 2 losers who are going to run when we've got a, quote, experienced candidate like Joe Biden. That means old to the average person. Experience means old. The front runners for the Democratic nomination are both in their mid-70s. And then we've got Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris and all these others who can't get out of their own way, who want to run to the far left. And the Democrats are going to nominate a very liberal progressive who Donald Trump is going to walk all over.
Well, Juan, you know, there was another guy who ran and won and hadn't run and won anything, Donald Trump.
I was thinking when Corey was talking,
he never won a political office, and he won the presidency.
Yeah, and also, hey, Corey, but I mean, Donald Trump's up in his 70s, so Joe Biden's highly experienced. I think when Joe Biden says he's the most qualified, it reminds me, you know, George H.W. Bush, very qualified, lots of experience. You can't argue with Joe Biden's many years in the Senate and also as the head of the Judiciary Committee.
They don't want Biden. They don't want Biden. They want Beto.
In the polls, he's the #1 candidate.
I know. Well, we have it. Biden's on the Harvard-Harris poll.
Yeah.
We'll put it up. It's Biden 25, Bernie Sanders 15, Hillary Clinton 13, Beto O'Rourke 9%.
Right.
I don't think that any of that means anything right now, because I'm telling you, although Obama is meeting with, he's met with Bernie Sanders, he's met with Elizabeth Warren, and Mitch Landrieu, speaking of people who like to pull down statues in the middle of the night, or at least countenance that, Mitch Landrieu. So the Obama folks and the former president himself, they're kind of running out of patience for Trump, Corey. Come on. Obama's like, all right, guys, let me see how it's done. Let me see it. Let me show you how it's done. And Beto is kind of the, as he's described by, was it the New York Times or Washington Post, as the white Obama. Like, they're describing him as that way.
Look, the Obama has seen all of his signature policies reversed under this president. He's seen the economy explode. He's seen the magician that he claimed didn't exist, which was Donald Trump, bring jobs back to our country. He's seen this president renegotiate bad trade deals, and he wants anybody who can challenge him. The problem is, look, in the 2016 election, we had the adult debates and we had the children's debate, which was 2 separate stages. Now with 30 candidates, we're going to have the geriatrics debate, the losers debate, and everybody else on the stage. I mean, it's amazing. We're going to have 30 people. You got to be kidding me.
Oh, all right, guys. I want to get your thoughts on something else, though, because tonight we're mourning the passing of a presidential campaign that never got off the ground. Michael Avenatti announcing on Twitter that he will not run in 2020. Could we possibly get the porn star attorney to change his mind and give Joe and Beto and Kamala a run for their money? Juan.
I think only if we want to tickle you and Corey, because you guys would have a field day talking about him and Stormy Daniels and all that. I think Stormy remains on the scene as kryptonite to Trump, but I think you guys as political people would think, how ridiculous. Now, I must say, he does reveal an instinct on the Democratic part, which is they want someone who would go toe-to-toe, slugging it out with the heavyweight champ, Trump, right? And so Avenatti says that's what he'll do. These other people, he says, you know, they're wimps. They're going to get run over by the big heavyweight Donald Trump. But I think you're going to find it that the Democrats have a big appetite for someone who's a fighter. But you know, to me, Avenatti has just too many deficits, too many flaws going in. He's too much of a target for you guys.
Yeah, well, he talked about you need a fighter in 2020, and
right.
Yeah, we get that, but you also need someone who comes with some level, I think, of gravitas and experience. I mean, who knows where we'll be in 2 years in the economy? Certainly hope the economy's doing well in 2 years, but you're going to go up against someone who's been through, you know, the meat grinder of politics for the last, you know, previous 6 years. And that's not easy. I don't care if you're young and energetic and good-looking, you're from Texas, and you have a cool name. That doesn't mean you have the political talent of Barack Obama. He had an enormous, raw political talent, Obama did. And we'll see about whether Beto does. Corey, real quick, close it out.
Well, I agree with Juan. I don't think anybody whose nickname is Creepy Porn Lawyer had a real chance of being the Democratic nominee. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's a great nickname to get into politics with, especially a guy who's been thrown out for not paying his bills. He has all these liens against him. I think Creepy Porn Lawyer had no real chance anyways.
All right, guys, thanks so much. And we have long warned about the dangers facing the caravan at our southern border, both during the trek and when they arrived. Two shocking developments have proved us right. The report is disturbing, and the video next.